It has been at least minimum 2 months since I sat in front of the camera like this to film a video. I have a fringe now. I'm pretty sure the last time I did it. Today, sorry, for the first time on this channel, I'm gonna talk about a book that I reread, because usually I don't reread books and I don't really talk about books that I reread. I read this a couple of months ago and I love Murakami. This is his newest book. I read it. I liked it. There were some stories that I really liked, but I feel like I couldn't understand why I was so obsessed with him. And suddenly it felt like I wasn't. And I'm like, maybe his effect is wearing off. But then I remembered I listened to After Dark as an audiobook last year and I fell in love with it. But I couldn't quite remember. You know, sometimes it's been a while and you're like, I want to revisit that. And I don't really usually have that with a lot of books. I do want to reread The Humans by Matt Haig at some point, because I've been raving about it for many years, but it was one of the first books I read when I got back into reading. So, well, but anyways, I ordered the physical copy because one, I wanted to own a physical copy of this book and complete my Murakami collection, but also rereading it as a book. I thought maybe I might get a new perspective or a new thoughts on this book that I would love to share. And definitely reading this because I don't reread books, I don't know how it is to reread, but I picked this up and I couldn't put it back down. Although I had read it before and I more or less knew the story, couldn't really, because there's no like plot really in his books. It's more like about instances. So you can, of course, reread them. And now I'm dying to reread Kafka on the Shore and Wind Up Bird Chronicle, hopefully soon. But anyways, I reread this and I really am so excited to talk about it. Since I haven't talked to a camera for a while, if I sound a little bit awkward, just forgive me. That's just me. But the first sentence of the book itself is so beautiful. It says, "Eyes mark the shape of the city," along with the characters in the book, which is like Eri and Mari. I think the two sisters that the whole book is around. Every single room in this book, every single place, even the city, feels like another character in this book. Yes, there are a bunch of really interesting characters already, but the way Murakami writes this book is like in a more simplistic way than a lot of his other stuff that I read, like less convoluted, but at the same time, the way he describes the city and the rooms and the spaces and the buildings, it almost gives like a very humanistic characteristic to these objects. I don't know if I explained that well. When he was describing like the scene of like Tokyo, and you're like honing in on this one person sitting in this one cafe, and I could feel these Japanese city pop from the 80s playing in the background, and I'm like, maybe I should play some of it because I can't understand the language. It's not going to be distracting. But there is something just so nostalgic about the way he writes it. Although I'm not from Tokyo, I'm not Japanese, and I shouldn't be feeling nostalgic, but he makes me feel nostalgic about a place that I've never even, I mean, I've been there, but I don't know. There's just this feeling. I think it's Murakami's own connection to Japan and Japanese society and culture that you feel through his writing. And that is so damn precious. So the book is about a girl who is sat at a cafe reading a book. You can't really see what she's reading, but anyways, someone comes and recognizes her, and they get into this conversation where she talks about her sister who is in this like kind of continuous deep sleep that she has not come out of for a long time. You hear this conversation between these two people and you're kind of wondering like, where is this going? Is this going to be about her and her sister's relationship? But actually then the book takes a turn where she suddenly is called to help out with a situation, and you throw in Chinese prostitutes, you throw in, I guess, triads, like Japanese gangs, not the Yakuza, but like so many different like love hotels and violence that happens in the city at night, and all of these things come in, but you end up kind of back in Eri's story with her sister, and it almost kind of feels like it shows you these two people that are more or less like two parts of the same thing, these sisters that are losing this form of connection, and at the same time you're following a story that kind of depicts, because it's called After Dark, it's not just like nighttime, like night and day after dark, but also when people kind of take a turn, or something happens in people's life and they take a turn, and after that darkness, what is left of them? And you see this being portrayed to different characters. People who seemingly look like ordinary people during the daytime with ordinary jobs and ordinary lives become this like animalistic, I'll not say animalistic because animals are cute, this like beast at night, okay? Something very vulgar, something very difficult to comprehend, how this person can be the same one. And then you think about these people who seemingly live in this like gray area of like where what is right and what is wrong, but then you uncover all the layers and you remove all these things and you see that the darkness is what you see first, and then once you look inside you see why that darkness exists. You're seeing them after dark, which is after the darkness that has been in their life. And I think that is more of the metaphor that he was going for, rather than the after dark, what happens in the nighttime, which I've read a couple of reviews. A lot of people say, look, it's like city life at like when all the people go away, what happens in the dark. I think it's more about when very dark things happen in your life and the way they change you. Who are we after those dark experiences? I interpreted it like that. I don't know if you would agree. I would love for you to read the book and actually tell me if you agree. But this is something that I have felt with Murakami's books quite a lot, where something very big happens in someone's life and then he goes on to tell you the story after. And most of the time you get to know these people after dark. Trying to form a connection between all his books. Rereading it made me fall in love with him again and made me want to reread all his books again. I'm going to read you a couple of parts that I highlighted, because I don't think I highlighted a ton. Because in Alphaville, you're not allowed to have deep feelings, so there's nothing like love, no contradictions, no irony. They do everything according to numerical formulas. And Alphaville is a love hotel that they are kind of forming a bit of the story around. And there's this like really short chapter about this one location called the Skylark, and it says, the deepest darkness of the nighttime streets is unable to penetrate here. Her somber gaze seems to be expecting some kind of occurrence, but there is no one on this side. And I think you almost see, like, when you come out of the dark sometimes and you are in that bright side of your life, that darkness is no longer able to penetrate because you've already experienced it, you've fought through it, you're here now, you're on the other side. But somehow your gaze always keeps expecting more darkness, or expecting the worst, or expecting kind of like something to happen. But you forget that whatever made you upset in the first place has been left behind. But we always kind of carry a part of it with us. And I felt like this Skylark place was just like, you're on the other side, but even if you've left that darkness behind, you're carrying kind of a shadow of it with you forever. What I want to say is probably something like this. Any single human being, no matter what kind of a person he or she may be, is all caught up in the tentacles of this animal-like giant octopus and is getting sucked into the darkness. You can put any kind of spin on it as you like, but you end up with the same unbearable spectacle. Basically saying that, like, there is things that happen in the world, that everybody is open, and nobody is immune to every kind of sadness. Sometimes there will be natural disasters, for even the richest people will get affected. Sometimes things like death, like cancer, like ill health, like cheating and adultery, like there are things, no matter what you have in this world, you are still vulnerable to some form of ugliness and some form of darkness. So, and there is one part where they talk about like the separating the self from everything that is happening around you. And I actually found this part to be very helpful in terms of thinking about like my own life, wherever I was at the time I was reading this. It's not that difficult once we make up our mind, aka remove our... I'm trying to have a very intellectual monologue here. Can you? Okay. It's not that difficult once we make up our mind to remove our mental self from our material self, from our physical self. All we have to do is separate from the flesh, leave all substance behind, and allow ourselves to become a conceptual point devoid of all mass. With that accomplished, we can pass through any wall, leap over any abyss, which is exactly what we do. We let ourselves become a pure single point and pass through the TV screen, separating the two worlds, moving from this side to the other. Ignore that part. When we pass through the wall and leap the abyss, the world undergoes a great deformation, splits and crumbles, and is momentarily gone. Everything turns into fine pure dust and scatters in all directions, and then the world is reconstructed. A new substance surrounds it. All of this takes but in a blink of an eye. And I think what this says is not to actually physically remove yourself from your body, but these are the types of passages where I see a lot of Kafka, and when people see Murakami is very inspired by Kafka, definitely this is a section where I see that, because it's more like it's in our mind. It's in our mind when we flip the switch and we finally accept something we have been denying for a long time. We finally do something in our head, and almost everything feels like it stopped for a second, broke apart, and came back together, and then on the other side of that second, it's a different world. But all that changed was your perception on what you were dealing with. And I think that's a very beautiful way to put that, because sometimes it's all in our head and we are listening to the voice for way too long. If you like very, very well written characters, read this book. If you like to just kind of have a light read but also be left with a lot of food for thought, read this. It's not a very heavy topic or a heavy book. It's actually really easy to get through compared to a lot of his other works. Very short as well. It's only like 200 pages. So definitely a great introduction to Murakami. I've talked about this book multiple times before in different Murakami wrap-ups or in general wrap-ups, but I thought it deserved a video of its own, just because it has been one of those that made me think about a lot of things. My perception on a lot of things has been changed after reading this, especially on how I view like my first meetings with people. I try to think more like, you know, why certain things are the way they are. I think I am more likely to give a person a chance even if my first impression of them is not the best. I will continue trying. Whereas before I used to go based on first impressions quite a lot, like the vibe and the feeling. Whereas nowadays I think I do the opposite, where I give people more than a chance. But at the same time, if I've had someone in a long time, I do the opposite, which is just because, you know, I might have had this friend in my life for a long time doesn't mean we should continue being friends if we don't really speak the same language anymore, or, you know, if you make me uncomfortable, for example. But it's a difficult thing, because for me, I've always been like, if I love you, I love you. I don't change my opinion on people. If I don't like you, I don't like you. And I think that is very difficult, from going from that to now being like, I might not like you, but I feel like I should be more open-minded and learn from people that are unlike me, or like think a different thing, and just give people a chance, and maybe you will find something about yourself that you were in denial. At the same time, being around people who think or believe the same things that you once did might be comfortable, but are you that person still? Have you moved on from being that person, and is this relationship making you uncomfortable now, and where are you at this point in your life, and do you agree with the same things, and hence can you have that same kind of, does the companionship mean the same thing to you? Don't know where I was going with that. But I did really like it, and I hope all of you do read this, because if out of all the books I recommended, I feel like you should read Murakami and you should read After Dark. But thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a long time since I came on here, so I really appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos while I was gone. And I'm 100 away from 2,000 followers, which would be... So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you later.